Hello YouTube. Today I'm going to be looking at exploration a little bit more in depth and what's changed specifically over time. And this comes up because we had a member of our org essentially come out of hibernation who hasn't been following the project over the past 2 or 3 years since he pledged in the announcement that there was going to be a lot of delays. And the reason why he pledged for the game specifically was some of the early exploration mechanics, which, from my understanding, are no longer really valid, and to great disappointment to him. And exploration isn't my cup of tea. As far as I'm concerned, if I want to explore, there's Elite Dangerous that I already have, and I could get the upcoming No Man's Sky if that was really my great desire. Within my organization, or the organization I'm a part of, I'm more responsible for the military and overall grand strategy planning of things as opposed to exploration and the logistics management size of things, which there are other members of the group who are really interested in doing those aspects of the game and have been paying closer attention than I have. So if I do say something wrong or my information is out of date, be sure to correct me in the comments section down below, and I will add annotations to the video at a later time as it becomes necessary. And if I'm wrong about something and there's more recent information, please provide a link to that information. Basically, cite your sources, as it were. So, let's go through here. This post is originally from August 2013, last edited June of 2014, so almost 2 years ago at this point, as this is April the 21st, 2016. So, exploration, sensor implementation, long range and AWACS sensor styles will be another level. Okay, direction will not be binary. Position, information, and sensors are treated separately. Sharing radar and sensor data is a key part of the command and control module, which, again, if I'm going through here and looking at it, this is sort of, somewhat, kind of supposed to be there. I'm not sure how well it's working. I mean, sensor gameplay at this point in time is very rudimentary as of Alpha 2.3.1. Detection will not be binary. In other words, there's multiple factors. This is already sort of there. That's being ES or EM, IR, and cross-section being the three major components in which it can be detected upon. And different ships have different things. And I'm assuming down the line we'll get different sensors. Some of them that'll be better at detecting heat sources, probably others more electromagnetic radiation, and others cross-section. They'll probably have different statistics in there. Positioning and information sensors are treated separately. Okay, so what that means is that your radar, essentially for scanning for other ships in combat and fire control and things like that, are different from the sensors that will be used to scan a planet, hence why ships like the Aquila sacrifices one of its turrets for that planetary type scanner. And I'm assuming that'll be the same in the Freelancer DUR and the 315P, etc. so on. Again, those areas of gameplay aren't in the game as of right now, so have no idea how exactly that'll work. Just some basic ideas. Sharing radar and sensor data, right, but the command and control module may be released, or may be delayed until after release. It doesn't look like that feature is going to be anywhere on the horizon. Both sensor noise and uncertainty will be modeled in some fashion. Again, that's not there yet. I haven't seen anything in the gameplay mechanics, updates, and stuff like that, if that's still the direction. I'm going to assume probably so. Again, we have very rudimentary sensor implementation at this point. Direction will primarily happen automatically based on the gear of you and your target, ruling out in certain... Okay. Tracker Hornet variant shows that the idea is outdated. Advanced sensor use and command and control from a single-seat ship. Well, I guess that is true. That is a single-seat ship, isn't it? Okay. Radar pods and special scanners, both listed as an example for Class 3 hardpoints, and the about the game. Again, we haven't seen anything outside of missile racks that go on a pylon, but it'll be interesting to see if and when this becomes more emergent gameplay, and I guess with Items 2.0 we should be expecting some more of that. Using active radar will make you easier to detect. Again, this isn't modeled into anywhere yet. Passive alone won't be enough to make you totally undetectable. This is directly out of flight sims, flight combat simulators. Typically in a Falcon BMS or DCS, you don't fly with your radar on, or if you are, you're on a mission profile like a TARCAP or defensive counter air or something like that, where you want them to know that you're in the sky and you're wanting to be there and detecting them. It's also prevalent in submarine gameplay as well with sonar detection, that if you send out an active sonar ping, yes, it allows you to detect other submarines in the vicinity, but the caveat to that is then they can also determine where you are as well. And same thing happens with radars. And there's entire areas of electronic warfare and ELINT that is dedicated to this aspect in modern warfare in the real world as well. But basically, like if you're doing a strike mission in, say Falcon BMS, typically your strike package will not activate your radar until you're past your initial point and essentially you're on your bombing run, and then you need to turn on that sensor in order to detect the enemy. Of course, this day and age, you also have things like GPS and JDAM bombs, as well as lasing pods, which don't require the use of a radar. Current plan is to narrow the sensor swath to be fixed ahead, as in Elite Dangerous' design. Capital ship sensors operate may be changed. Now, this is sort of kind of there with certain ships. Excuse me. Again, very rudimentary. As in, like the Sabre in particular and the Hornet Ghost, you will lose tracking if they're at certain angles to you and things like that. Okay, so that was the plan. However, I think that the sensors do kind of give you a little bit of a sensor bubble right now. I suspect that was also the purpose of having a Hornet tracker, would be that its radar dome would provide you with more or less a 360 by 360 degree bubble. But again, rudimentary modeled, so it might change down the road. But if it does, and they talk about implementing these mechanics, I think there's going to be a lot of pushback from the more casual players, because you're starting to talk about very in-depth sim aspects to the game, which so far they've been relatively light on when you look at how the control setups and stuff like that work. Environmental effects such as solar radiation, heavy dust, nebula will increase sensor uncertainty. Okay. Small or distant contacts will be fuzzy and resolve with higher power. So this is kind of how Elite Dangerous works. Farther out targets, you'll notice something's there blipping around in its general direction until you get within 5 or 6 kilometers. Then it'll become apparent what it is. And oftentimes you can also pick up on ship's trail or engine glow with a Mark 1 eyeball at even further distant ranges from that, especially if you have a big enough screen in front of you. Radar provides position data and displays it on a dedicated... Okay, that's kind of there. Radar range will exceed weapons range. Yes, right now it seems to be about 30 kilometers in the universe, 30 to 40 kilometers depending on the ship, is what you can detect things out to, at least whenever we've been in Yela. Radar shadowing will be modeled, line of sight will matter, okay. That does already kind of sort of exist if things do go behind an asteroid or something like that. You can lose contact, and also if they present a smaller target. So some of that's kind of there. Radars will have range settings to help track smaller targets. Okay. None of that's there yet, but there's nothing that I've seen recently that indicates that they're going to make any major changes. If they have, let me know. Alright, so scanners are what they're talking about, sensors other than positional data. So planetary scanners, mineral scanners, things of that nature. Information sensor suites are like combat status, shield weapons, cargo scanning, jump point scanning. Okay. So these will be the different scanners that you'll need for some of those other things. Additional mentions of scanners as a way to identify the player handles, true identity, so if you want to do false naming and things like that. But again, I haven't seen too many updates on what they're planning to do there. Alright. What can you find? 70% of each star system will be unexplored. Alien wrecks, asteroid fields with resource deposits, lots of interesting space features, possibly treasure island style, treasure hunt. Alright, derelicts. Some derelicts can be explored on foot. Repairable Bengal carriers, asteroid bases, old areas. That'll have some system for keeping them explorable. Oh, okay. Old areas, meaning once they've been discovered, there'll be some way of keeping them explorable. In other words, giving people reasons to go back. Especially if we're going to have a much more limited universe to start out with and 1 million players in a very tiny bubble, essentially, or fishbowl, or whatever you want to call it. Uh, Basically, if they don't do something like this, you're going to run out of it. As Malcolm Reynolds liked to say, my sky is getting kind of busy, or, crap, what is that line from Serenity? Uh, it's something along the line of, my sky is getting pretty crowded, isn't it, these days? And I think that's going to be the effect of just having a limited number of star systems, at any rate. Rare, unexpected, possibly unique encounters that are not persistent, perhaps found by faint... Okay, so these are going to be basically your random raid instances, for lack of a better term, that, oh, hey, we detected that there's a random 0.35 chance that you run across a bunch of pirates at this point. You destroy those pirates, and, or the next person who comes by, they don't get that encounter, essentially. So that's going to be more like randomized matchmaking. If you're familiar with Elite Dangerous, that would be probably very close to like USS's have been in its various iterations. This section covers any exploration. Okay, salvage mechanic, yeah. Although I don't know if or when salvage will be there. We're talking, I think, what is it, the Reclaimer being the primary salvage ship. But remember, at one time, it was kind of proposed that the Gladiator, you could swap out nothing in the bomb bays and put a tractor beam on the turret where the turret is and use it for light salvage. But again, that's changed, I think, quite a bit. Discovering jump points to an unknown system will be highly valuable, as well as granting you naming rights. Now, this is a mechanic that my understanding is not... that if it is there, it's only going to be 1 or 2 locations at the very, very beginning, or maybe a half a dozen locations at the very beginning until they get their procedural tech to the point where they want it, which is still sounding like it could be somewhere down the line before they're able to procedurally generate entire star systems, basically on the fly. Presumably discovering unknown jump points to an unknown system will have a monetary rewards. Yeah, I'm sure it will. If either in-game from turning it into an official source, or from organizations willing to buy that information off an individual. Record resource location, sell that information. Okay, so again, that information can go out to the general populace, or I'm assuming probably to organizations and things like that too. And if you sell resources, gives you royalty off the sale of that info. So if you give it to an NPC store and people go mine from that area, deposits can be overmined and exhausted. Yeah, we know that they will be depletable and will not respawn as of right now. Presumably treasure hunt methods will be some sort of cash value, identifying and following ships with bounties, selling their locations. Okay. Share autopilot data for formation flying. This may allow slaving a customer's autopilot to your nav data and guiding them through the hazards. But this was Rob Irving. He has no longer worked for CIG for, I think, over a year at this point, so don't know how accurate that would be. As an intelligence officer, meaning scouting missions. Okay. Some things I think have changed there. This part right here, I think a lot of people were expecting there to be dozens or hundreds of systems that people would be able to find. I think it's only going to be a handful, and it'll probably be highly valuable to find this information out. But if you're the one who discovers it, it's just going to be probably by happenstance. But I think a lot of people are expecting there to be hundreds of these star systems that people could go out and find and claim themselves and put their name on it. But I think that's going to be very, very few, if any, especially at the very beginning. Maybe 5 years from now, that might be a different story going forward, but I think initially in PU and upon commercial launch, that it's not going to be quite the gameplay that many people are anticipating. I suspect that resource depositing and stuff like that will probably exist. Probably there will be some sort of royalties on that as well. If you don't feel like mining. Alright, so what's the next? Earning credits, I think. Alright, explore, make money. Okay, so we did go after that section. Jump points. Manually travel.
Stand by.
Oh, what the hell is the... Voice controls off. Voice control off?
Muting.
There we go. Sorry about that. Alright. Get interrupted by William Shatner. What am I going to tell you? Ooh. Prince died. Or the artist formerly known as a symbol? That's unfortunate. Neither here nor there, but that just popped up. I've got my iPad here and my iPhone with me too, and it just popped up on there. Anyway, back onto the topic of conversation here. Okay, yeah, at launch, more jump points will be unknown than known. Okay, so basically, we already have the star map, and we have kind of a layout of, I guess, permanent known jump points, and then there'll be other jump points that'll come up, and you can sell that data. And I understand that some of them will only be available for a short period of time. You know, maybe they only last a few days or weeks, and then they will collapse, and you'll have to go find a new way, and they could be in shortcut from point A to B. Maybe ways, let's say, like there's only a permanent small entrance into a system, and then a large jump point opens up to that system. You can get your mining fleets and your hull Ds and Es to set up maybe a temporary base of operations, but you risk the chance that if that basically wormhole or jump point collapses behind you, that you'll have to wait for another one to be found to get those assets out of there, because if it's only allowing small ships through, well, your hull Es and your Icarus and ships like that aren't going to be going anywhere. So the risk is if you take a big ship to exploit the resources in that area, you very well could find those ships trapped there for an indeterminate amount of time until they can find a large enough jump point that opens up that they can get out. So that could be a very interesting gameplay mechanic. At the same time, I know that there are going to be people who come along and it'll frustrate the hell out of them and could be a rage-inducing quitting type phenomenon. So it'll be very interesting if they end up keeping it that way. I'm more of the opinion that if you and your org take that kind of assets, that's part of the risk. Maybe you come up with a high reward out of it, but you know, if that jump point closes and you have to wait 3 weeks for another one to open up or something like that, or to find another large jump point out of there, you know, that's part of the risk and reward mechanic. You know, sucks to be you, but you took the risk and it bit you in the ass. That would be my point on it, but I know a lot of other people will disagree with me on that one. Yeah, smaller ships will have an easier time navigating jump points, and we've seen some artist renditions, essentially animations of how this is supposed to work. Jump scanner, you'll need this to detect new jump points. Obviously, P-52 cannot be equipped with a jump drive. Probably the P-72 now, I think, as well. Basically, this is all known. Also can't be fitted with a quantum drive. It's a snub fighter. All ships, well, you can equip jump drives. Not all of them is stock. Yep, that's right. And the ship spec page is not accurate. 110 and 20 and 30%, yeah. Using jump points will not consume fuel. But that was Wingman Hangars 36. Fuel mechanic has completely changed, and we'll take a look at that and discuss that a little bit further. Much to my chagrin, I was hoping that fuel would be a serious mechanic for flying in normal cruise mode and afterburn and stuff like that, but it doesn't. It isn't right now, and again, I guess you can chalk it up to being rudimentary implementations. But when we get to fuel, we'll discuss that more in depth. Jump points I believe that this is wrong now. I believe that jump points now will consume quantum drive fuel or quantum fuel. That quantum driving inside a system to point of interest consumes fuel, as we see in the universe module, and then using a jump point to jump between system and system will use even more fuel. As well, again, we'll discuss that more a little bit later. Only connect to one place in each direction. No getting out in the middle. Alright, so once you're committed to a jump, you're committed to the jump. You can't basically stop in the middle of dead space. Only way to travel between systems. No interstellar manual flight mode. Yes. That's probably going to be there. Jump openings will probably be static, meaning they'll be in the same place every time. They're not going to change the area. Jump navigation will degrade over time. Regular resurvey for the safe automatic route. Okay. So what they're saying here, and I have no reason to assume that this has changed, is that jump points will have to be navigated, or data will have to be purchased and in order to basically autopilot through them. Else you can always risk going through it manually and your ship getting blown up or something like that. Alright, so that's what we know about jump points. Sensors, radars, and scanners. I think we already looked after that. Exploration ships. Fully modded ships not sold as exploration ships would be just as suitable as fully modded ships. So basically you can turn a 300i into a 315p, except for the default paint job. Freelancer Dur. Hornet Tracker as a exploration ship. I guess I could see it as UN Scout. I haven't heard this being called a exploration ship anytime soon. Variants will not release before the end of LTI. Variant upgrades applied to LTI. This is back when LTI was a major concern, and every ship under the sun didn't come with an LTI release, it seemed like, including token ships like the P-72. Basically, if you don't have LTI at this point, you've just not been paying attention in order to grab a sale at the right time. Okay, I mean, there's nothing, what I call, there's nothing really there much. Stealth. Heat, EM. This is in-game in a rudimentary fashion. Reduce heat, fewer lasers, smaller thrusters, smaller power plant. This kind of is starting to be there. Reduce active radar systems. I don't think that this is. I'm not, again, I haven't really messed around too much with the stealth of lower pack in the stealth armor. Also, it's important to note that I believe that the Delta, the Mustang Delta, has an armor that's supposed to reduce its heat signature, its infrared signature. Cannot turn invisible. Basically, no Star Trek-like cloaking devices. Hide within spatial features like nebulas and dust clouds. Detection would primarily happen automatically depending on hunter-seeker gear. Basically, your sensor power versus whatever their countermeasures are in place. Using comm systems will increase your signature. Again, this is... You might have that interacting with NPCs or something like that, but nobody, if this remains a thing, nobody is going to use the in-game comms. They're all going to use a TeamSpeak, Vent, Mumble, Discord, something like that. Okay, the fake IDs, but we'll be able to deep scan through it, multiple types of detection. We haven't heard much about those type of mechanics in a while. Encounters that drop you out of fast travel will not always mean combat. True. But basically, when you drop out of fast travel, out of quantum jump, it's basically it hides the matchmaking process. Hide behind asteroids, or again, this radar shadowing type mechanic. This is basically how it works in the real world. Surprisingly, a good movie adaptation example of this is in Top Gun, where they had the two F-5s that they called MiG-28s flying very close together, and it looked like one target. And then as they get closer, they separate and fly farther apart, and then all of a sudden it turns out to be like 2 targets and then 4 targets. And that's known as being merged on the radar scope. It'll happen also in very close-in dogfights, where if, let's say, your wingman and another fighter, enemy fighter, are too close together and the radar can't distinguish who's who, you can't use a radar-guided missile like a Sparrow or an AMRAAM. So, not really too much more there than we didn't already know. Electronic warfare. This will be very interesting. Chaff dispensers are in the game along with flare dispensers. ECM is currently not part of the game, but it probably will be. These will probably end up being pods, like they've said. And I imagine that they'll both be external pods, as you will see in various jamming pods that are used by military, in particular the U.S. military, on different aircraft, as well as probably some sort of internal units to be used on the Vanguard, whatever variant is the electronic warfare variant of it, as well as probably could be fitted into the bomb bay of the Gladiator. In fact, that would basically make the Gladiator like an EF-111 Sparkvark, which was a modification of the F-111 fighter bomber. Really, was more of a bomber attack aircraft than a fighter. But at any rate, I could see something like that happening as well. No details. Heat-seeking, friend-foe, image recognition, and dumbfire. This has changed. They're still heat-seeking, IR missiles. Friend-foe aren't there. I'm about to say friend-foe mechanics are very rudimentary. The flags have just gotten there, so it might be added in some of the current missiles, but there's also image recognition. Those are there as well. Although I think image recognition is now known as cross-section missiles. And then we have electromagnetic seeking missiles and dumbfire, but no friend-foe missiles. But until we can really designate people who are friends versus enemies and stuff like that, and specifically mark them, and implement some sort of IFF system, that's not going to exist. Now, interestingly enough, this was the missile lineup from the traditional Wing Commander series of games. But image recognition, I think, is now considered to be cross-section missiles. Radar sensors, counter, okay, with counter, okay. Not much there. Fuel usage and range. Exploration will involve expanded and or efficient fuel consumption, more efficient engines, larger gas tanks as opposed to other equipment. It'll sacrifice cargo space for fuel in ships like the Freelancer Dirt, that's already planned. Lighter hulls and armor. Okay, so you're not going to have the heaviest armor, therefore lighter mass, therefore less gas to make it go. Speed will affect fuel efficiency, so going slower will increase your range. Now, this is a yes and no. I know that this has changed completely from what's listed here over the course of the past few years, and particularly the last, really about 6 months. Fuel is only if you use thrusters. Turning off the IFCS and engines will allow you to coast. Yeah, that does happen when you have, whatchamacallit, decoupled on. But, as it stands right now, using fuel in space combat mode and cruise mode outside of quantum jump doesn't exist anymore. So the fuel gameplay mechanic has really been substantially dumbed down from what was being proposed a couple of years ago. This is very flight sim-esque, and I think that as the backer crowd has grown more casual, this has been put up on the sacrificial altar to them. So it's not like you're carrying so much fuel for your engines anymore, and you have to worry about having a tanker nearby that can gas it up. The only time apparently you're going to use fuel now is if you're in quantum jumps, and apparently jump points, from my understanding, is now going to consume that quantum fuel. So you'll be using it to jump from place to place, and not having to worry about burning fuel for things, and maybe eventually afterburners. And using the boost functionality, you'll have a little bit, you only have a limited amount of boost fuel. Right now they're going with the more free space-esque afterburner mechanic where it recovers over time. Although I think that's a sacrifice to current gameplay and not having some of these features ready to be implemented. Again, I guess we'll see what happens with items 2.0. But fuel and range and things like that are going to be much, much less critical, I think, because you'll basically have unlimited fuel if you stay in cruise or combat maneuvering mode. And apparently you'll need to be in those modes in order to discover certain things in between some of the larger points of interests, as it were. So That'll be interesting. To me, that really lowered the depth expectations of the game when they announced that basically you had unlimited maneuvering fuel. I was really hoping that they would stick to their guns on this, but again, that kind of brings back to the sensor gameplay. That given how casual the fuel mechanic has gone, from being something that a lot of people were thinking was going to have to be considered when you're planning routes and stuff like that, to basically a minor consideration for just jumping from point of interest to point of interest quick. I expect that sensor gameplay is going to go the same way. I just don't see the casuals being thrilled with having to scan targets and then start to recognize their signature based on patterns or something like that, and only being able to restrict it to seeing something like within the certain cone unless you have a more omnidirectional sensor or something like that. I definitely see the sensor gameplay being dumbed down to meet the same levels as the fuel requirement to satisfy this more casual base that's come around compared to what was kind of the expectations 2.5 years ago ish, more or less. All right. Miscellaneous. Science-related mini-game player activity will need to feel natural and make it sense. Okay, no details. They've not really fleshed that out in any more details, other than that there are going to be science-y ships in the Endeavor. One of the Reliant concepts is also a science ship, so we'll have to see. No need to pack food and water, so our characters, it's not going to be a survival game like DayZ or any of those type of games, say Empyrean Online, another example of that. Yet there's bathrooms and stuff, and you'll apparently have to do something like maintain your hygiene or something in order to gain favor. I don't know. They've talked about this, but we'll see if and when and if it ever gets implemented in any meaningful way. There will be other things to do on the ships to pass the time on long transits. This has been confirmed with a lot of mini games. I suspect that things like refining fuel on the Starfarer will require a mini game and somebody to be playing that mini game, as well as probably having to deal with random ship faults and stuff like that and repair them in transit. Yeah, mini games. Games within a game. I'll also add to this, make sure that you're on TeamSpeak with a bunch of people that you love having conversations with, because it sounds like this is going to be a game that the pace of playing probably isn't going to be the fastest. I'm wondering if people who are used to the small universe and being, quote, fast-paced enough now, whenever it does get expanded, are going to have many of the same complaints that are leveled at Elite Dangerous in terms of travel times and things like that. Because right now it takes only a few seconds to get to places, but as the ranges spread out, essentially, it's going to be several minutes of travel time from point of interest to point of interest, even in Quantum Jump. And it could be hours of travel time if you're using cruise mode. So it's going to be interesting to see how they do that. Okay, it says that 67% of people want to explore, and they prioritize this content and mechanics. Although I still say that the information that we have out there is still pretty limited. This is probably more information than we have on their current thinking, and the problem is I think a lot of this is maybe out of date. A bed is required to hibernate and log out safely. Most ships will have one. I still believe this is the plan. The Avengers actually all do have a... I think, well, maybe the EMP version. The Warlock may not, but I know that the Titan and the Stalker variants do have beds. 6 degrees of freedom and ship controls. Yep, we have that now. We didn't for the first few months. Can deal... Okay, yeah. We don't know when the being able to deal with other races outside of probably the Vandal will happen. My understanding is that the Banu, the Tavon, and the Sheen still haven't been concepted as far as looks and things like that yet. So, outside of the Vandal, initially, we may or may not be dealing with alien races for quite some time. Medal system to show that where you've been and what you've accomplished. Okay, so hangar trophies, essentially. And some of those are still there that they've given away as gifts and backer milestone things. Discoveries will have an effect on the game, including new technologies or a limited run of improved variant items. I don't know if they're still planning on that or not. There will be a Dead Space-like space horror elements to derelicts. Okay. I can see that. That's sort of somewhat there if you go around the Kovaluk shipping hub or various wrecks around Yala. Okay. Yeah. We can chat later. Exploration art, exploration guilds, links in guides, miscellaneous. Game economy, piracy guide. Probably all of this is going to be obsolete quote archive. Alright, so edited, it says information will change as the develop by more recent will likely involve expanded and sophisticated sensors, fuel and fuel efficiency regulation. But yeah, the fuel efficiency regulation I think is gone to scanning beyond the general map scan, meaning is unclear. Don't know. So we'll have to see. Well, that's kind of then and now when it comes to exploration. So I think I will end this video and see what other person wants. And probably do a few more of these videos in the future of going back and looking what's there and what isn't there anymore. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time.